You're right. Our speaker this morning is a very experienced astronaut who has flown on a space shuttle and has also flown on Expedition 28 and 29 through 167 days on the International Space Station. And before that, he had quite an illustrious career in the Air Force. Was a flight test engineer at Edwards. Worked here before he went to Edwards on the shuttle program, and had a great background with NASA before he went back into the Air Force, and then came back to NASA and became an astronaut in 1998 and retired in 2017, and has now become, and did become back in 2017, became the Vice President of Texas A&M University and the Chief Operating Officer for the Texas A&M University Galveston campus. So let me introduce Mike Fossum. And Mike, the reason Mike was a little late this morning, he had another commitment to do a speech earlier, and so he's on a very tight schedule. So thank you for being here, Mike.
Thank you, George. And my apologies for being late. It's a lot of dear friends in here. I wish I could have shared coffee with you earlier this morning, and wish I could hang around after to talk some too, but it's been quite a journey. I'll keep this fairly short. 50 years ago this summer, this 11-year-old boy was watching the Apollo 11 crew walking on the moon. I remember walking out into the backyard late that night after they'd wrapped up that moonwalk, and growing up in McAllen, Texas, down in the Rio Grande Valley, and looking up from my backyard at that moon hanging right over my house, trying to wrap my head about the reality that there were two humans, two Americans, on the moon at that time. And it took a while to sink in. I remember just almost shaking. That ignited an impossible dream in me, the son of a sharecropper. The treehouse in my backyard was transformed into a space station. It even had little personal crew compartments because you wouldn't need much room in space. You just kind of slide into your sleeping bag. As a 12-year-old, I started my Mars notebook because I knew we're on the moon right now. Mars is the next big step. Mars was 30 years away, so I had time and I wanted to be ready. As an engineer at NASA, I worked way under, George and Shep during the days of the redesign, starting in '93 and in the years after that followed as we figured out how all the pieces were going to come together. My dream of flying in space was realized as I helped build the space station on 2 space shuttle missions and a spacewalker. And then I launched on a Russian rocket 8 years ago for my long-duration mission, and I served as the commander of the International Space Station that I helped design and build. It's been a dream come true. Unfortunately, Mars still appears to be 20 to 30 years away. We're now planning, and we've started hearing about it today, and it really resonates in all kinds of ways. Working hard to go back to the moon in a bigger, different way with international crews, and the dream of building a more of a base there for longer stays and more exploration, perhaps with the Gateway. This will allow us to test many of the systems that we need to establish a base on a remote, hostile place. But the short journey to the moon does not prepare us for the challenging journey to Mars and back. To do that, we need the space station. And I fear that we're not learning as much as we can and must from it while we have it. Human health and profoundly reliable life support systems are really the hardest part of all. The first elements of the space station were launched in 1998. And we've had crews permanently there since 2000 when Shep and Sergei Krikalev began Expedition 1. The ISS was designed for only a 30-year life, with hopes maybe of extending that, but this still depends on stable support from the partner nations And we must never forget we're always one serious, crippling failure away from losing the ISS. One bad fire, one toxic leak into the cabin, or a serious strike from orbital debris could force an evacuation and possibly result in a total loss of this national treasure. To the disappointment of many, 8 years ago, after the last space shuttle mission, we still only have one human spacecraft, the Russian Soyuz, to get crews to and from the ISS. I was on board the ISS in 2011. After STS-135, and we knew there were no more space shuttle flights, there was a failure of a Russian Progress launch that used a Soyuz booster. Didn't make orbit. Cargo ship was destroyed. That put a great fear into the ability to launch, or the safety to launch humans on the Soyuz spacecraft in the near term. There was a lot of work as they tried to figure out what went wrong and try to recover and get back to flight status for the humans on the Soyuz spacecraft, because that was the only one we had. We started work on the space station to figure out, and trust me, the real work was on the ground, to figure out how could we. The space station was not designed to operate for a long period of time without humans. There are way too many critical failures that can take place that need quick reaction from the crew on board to maintain its habitability, to maintain its control, its ability to even stay in space. So we started working things like dragging huge, we call them anaconda jumper cables, from one part of the ISS to the other to provide emergency cross-strap power in case we had to leave and left the station. We wanted to leave it with as much reliability and failure tolerance as possible. Fortunately, things were working out. The Expedition 27-28 crew that were the senior crew at that time, their stay on space was rumored to be extended by a couple of months, but they were only up there about an extra week or so. We were up there solo, though, for most of Expedition 29. The Expedition 29-30 crew was delayed, but eventually they made it. We had 4 days to hand over the space station. 4 days, when it's normally 2 months. We didn't sleep much, but we used every minute of time to make sure the crew that came behind us could be successful. I tell you this story to illustrate we really have no idea how long we'll have that ISS. So we need to learn as much as we possibly can now. We've accumulated a lot of data to prove that crews can maintain muscle and bone mass with the use of the ARED and treadmills like the T2. But those massive devices won't fit in a deep space exploration vehicle. There's been some limited testing of new compact devices, but do we have the data to be sure that these systems can keep crews healthy enough to explore Mars when we finally get there and get them home safely? We need these to be tested for functionality to ensure the crew can tolerate using something like that, because trust me, the ARED and T2 are sweet. Can you really convince the crew to keep exercising diligently on these devices? And we need to prove they're reliable. We learned long ago that space toilets are hard. The current complex system on the ISS does work well, but it takes up a lot of room and requires repairs more frequently than you would like. I participated in design reviews of the new toilet for the Orion several years ago, and understand we're finally finalizing plans to launch one to ISS. That's great news. Folks, we need to get this right. Our experience with life support systems has also demonstrated to us that we still don't know how to design systems which are highly reliable without testing them in microgravity. The CEDRA, carbon dioxide removal assembly, is a good case in point. Shep and Jim Voss may be twitching right now. It was tested extensively on the ground and first launched in the U.S. lab during Expedition 1. It had its first failure during Expedition 1. When Jim and Susan, and that was totally unexpected because we had tested it so much on the ground. We thought we understood everything. We had 1,000 hours of runtime on it. We hurriedly rushed to develop procedures to work on a device that was never intended to be opened up and worked on orbit. And the Expedition 2 crew, Jim and Susan, launched to space, I think with the spare parts in their laps. It was that close, almost. That's the way I'm telling it. I got the mic, Jim. Something could have changed in the last few years since I left NASA, but I believe that every crew since Expedition 2 has had the joy of working on that beast. I know it was one of my favorites. We've had the same challenges with systems for water purification. We've talked about them some. Oxygen generation and others. In order to successfully complete a mission to Mars, we need systems reliable enough to operate for years out of the reach of resupply vessels with launch-on-demand spare parts. The life support rack, which ESA launched recently, is operating on the space station now, does hold promise, but we need a lot of runtime on it, and we need to figure out if we can really scale it up to give it the capability we need and the proven reliability we need. Mars may still be 30 years away, but the clock is ticking because the ISS provides us the only platform to test and prove these systems. We must ensure the long-term reliability of these crucial systems to maintain the health of the crew and their environment, or we will never venture far from the safety of this planet. Our key to extending the realm of humans further into space is in your realm of space medicine. Rocket science, no offense, rocket science is easy. Keeping humans mentally and physically healthy for the duration of these incredible journeys is really the biggest and hardest challenge of all. Thank you for your participation in this summit and this conference and for your dedication to finding those answers that will enable this greatest endeavor of all human achievements. Thank you very much.
Well, Mike has already started panel 2, so the rest of the panel better get up here since he's already let in.
Good.
Because the next panel is maximizing the use of space station. And I think you need to address everything that Mike said.
Is this going to be recorded? I need to watch it.
Right. So will the next panel come forward? Don?